Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/spookshow. Then go over to morbidlybeautiful.com as we are now part of the Morbidly Beautiful Podcasting Network.
In the depths of the night, the podcast takes stage. Spookshow, Sucky Summer, unleashing its rage. Vampires and ghouls, tales untold. Blood-soaked memories we can't withhold. From classic vampire movies, black and white shone, to cult films that thrill like a scary alarm. From canon films, creations, and grindhouse surprises, sucked into a video vortex. Bloody tears from your eyes, nightmares are lurking in the dark. Spookshow, Sucky Summer, repeat and lost. Demons and Dracula, blood on the street. Classic movies and false films, so haunting our
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the All-American Spook Show podcast. The Sucky Summer continues. I'm Josh, and I'm joined here with Donny.
Yo.
Tiana.
Hi.
And the Professor Smoke. And this week we're letting Donny pick. And Donny, you picked this thing months ago. So what are we talking about? Like when we were originally talking about doing the Sucky Summer, you're like, yeah, put me down for this. So what are we watching?
Yeah, we're watching Dracula from 1931.
Yeah, it's a gimme. Like this had to be on the list at some point this summer. So I'm sure if you hadn't picked it, somebody else would have, or we would have, we would have shoehorned it in. But you can't go wrong picking arguably the original Dracula movie, right? I mean, because there was Nosferatu, but that's not Dracula.
Yeah.
It's basically the same story, but that's not Dracula, right, Smoke?
Yeah, they wanted it to be Dracula, but the estate wouldn't allow it at the time. It was still under copyright.
Yeah.
So they had to go with Nosferatu. So yeah, this is the first official Dracula.
Yeah, and we'll get into some of the background and all that jazz, but a couple things we'll remind you of off the top. We are a spoiler-filled podcast, so if for whatever reason over the last, let me check my watch, about a 90-something years, you haven't watched Dracula, you might want to hit pause, go check it out, come back and listen to the rest of this, because we are going to spoil it for you. Also, we always like to remind you to go check out aaspookshow.com. We call that the center of the Spook Show universe, and from there you can listen to our all of our past podcast archives. All the episodes should be found fairly easily over there. Also, reach our YouTube channel from there, where every month we have 3 different series that we have over there: Grindhouse Gutter, Video Vortex, Hammer Horror in Order. So those are lots of fun. Like, you don't get the deep dive that you get here on the podcast episodes, but you get a more brief, say 10 to 15 minute long. We talk about the movies that we choose for the different series, and then we give our ratings there. But obviously, a lot of the ones that we watch there will eventually, a couple of them have, but they'll all eventually make their way over to the main podcast. But if you want the more edible video bites, those are on YouTube. And of course, we would appreciate it if you become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/AASpookshow. I think that $5 level is the sweet spot. If you're willing to throw down a few bucks to help us out, and you get a lot of cool bonus content, including video minisodes every month, which has the Library of the Professor segment that is always one of the more popular things that we do there, where the professor takes something from his vast library of records and VHS and CEDs and whatever the hell else he's got back there, posters, toys, whatever, and we talk about that. So that's always fun. And the one that's not as fun for us, but fun for you, the listener, Crapsterpiece Theater, where every month we put up a poll. You vote for what we're going to be watching there the next month, and that's always like the 4 biggest turds we can find. And you choose it, we watch it, we have to suffer through that. So you can only listen to that by becoming a patron at patreon.com/AASpookshow. And just for a note, the current poll that is up right now on all the socials. And you can vote as often as you want over on Patreon, X, Facebook, Instagram, Slasher, all the various socials that we have. And you can vote as often as you want. Stuff the ballot box if you want to. This month we got the 4 steaming piles are The Love Guru from 2008,
God.
Shark Exorcist from 2014, Junior from 1994, the Arnold Schwarzenegger's pregnant flick, and Full Metal Ninja from 1989. So you can see you've got 4 vastly different piles of crap there, all horrible for different reasons, or great. You know, the only way we find out is you vote for it and we watch it. So those are your options. You've got to the end of the month, which that will be July 31st at midnight. And we'll tally those up at the beginning of August and let you know what's going to win. And then that episode will actually air. That'll actually be the 30th Crapster piece that we do, Donnie. 30th.
Dang. 30 of these turds.
Yeah,
man.
and that will actually hit the world. The shit hits the fan on August 30th. Crapster piece 30. So go vote as often as you want there and come back and check that out over on patreon.com/Spookshow. So without any further build-up, we'll go ahead and toss the trailer for Dracula.
I am Dracula. A moment ago, I stumbled upon a most amazing phenomenon. Something so incredible, I mistrust my own judgment. Look.
Dracula. The very mention of the name brings to mind things so evil, so fantastic, so degrading. You wonder if it isn't all a dream, a nightmare.
Rats. 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 Thousands. Millions of them.
But no, this is no dream. This is Dracula, the original terrifying story of a maniac and a man who lived after death, lived on human blood, took the form of a vampire bat, and lured innocent girls to a fate truly worse than death.
Dracula? Oh, what's he done to you, dearie? Tell me.
He came to me. He opened the thing in his arms, and he made me drink.
All right, there we go. That's the trailer for that. So I'm assuming this is one we've all watched 1,000 times. Donnie, what is, since you brought it to the table, what's some of your earliest memories of watching this Dracula?
Oh, man. So it wasn't, it's not the first horror movie I watched. I remember the first horror movie I watched, but just I wasn't supposed to watch it at the time, but just as I was coming up, just kind of growing up, got into the Universal monsters, and so this was actually one of the first. I think very first one I watched was Frankenstein. I remember, but I remember watching Dracula. Just always enjoyed it. Mainly, honestly, it's like the main set when Dracula's coming down. That's just, to me, still beautiful.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've watched this several times.
Tiana, what about you?
I watched this a handful of times and love it every time. Bela Lugosi's is so good in it. But I can't really remember what age I was. I probably wasn't until I was like 10 or 12. My first time watching it.
Yeah, I'm the same. I don't really remember the first time I watched this. I'm willing to bet you I probably saw Abbott and Costello. Is Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, right? Where all of them are in it, Smoke? Like all the monsters? I bet you $5 I watched that before I watched this. Because I used to watch the Abbott and Costello movies on like local TV and shit all the time. So I bet you I saw that one first, but it probably wasn't long after that I saw Dracula, Frankenstein, and all the rest. So what about you, Smoke?
Yeah, I saw it. I don't know. Again, I don't remember the exact age or anything. It was on TV in some maybe whether it was around Halloween or just some random time or whatever. I'm sure it was on TV first that I saw it. But I think my love of Universal monsters probably was not even through the Universal movies at first. I think it was probably through. Oddly enough, one of the things I definitely remember is the Dracula Viewmaster. Remember, everybody remembers Viewmaster.
Oh yeah.
There was a Dracula Viewmaster story reel or whatever that was not Bela Lugosi. I don't remember who did the artwork or anything, but it was striking to me at the time or whatever. And I remember watching. It was similar to Bela Lugosi, I guess, but it was all full color. It wasn't like stills from the movie or anything. It was its own storyline. But I definitely remember that. But I just don't remember the first time I saw this. But I was probably pre-teen for sure. 7, 8, 9, maybe even when I saw it on TV the first time.
Yeah, and like
since then it's been quite a few times.
And a lot of people now they probably don't get. Maybe you are talking about we are kind of the older. We're starting to skew to the older crowd now, but the younger crowd you may not get. Like you used to watch this type of stuff on that. Unless you went to the video store, right, or if you say didn't randomly own a copy, and let's face it, a lot of people didn't own copies of shit back then. Or you taped it off TV. That's how you saw it. Like, you would watch this. It would come on your local TV or maybe even I don't even know. Maybe if this played on HBO or something like that. But a cable channel, whatever. And maybe you taped it. Maybe you watch it live, and that's the way you would see it. So these are the kind of movies that would play over and over and over again. You would see these more often than just about anything else, right? Like other than maybe Godzilla or some kung fu flicks, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's when you had cable. Like if you were lucky enough, when I was younger, eventually cable came out to where we were at, but we were outside the city limits and didn't have cable for a while. And I didn't even, I'm the granddad of the group. I think I'm the oldest here. And at 5 or 6 years old, there wasn't even a video store at the time. I mean, it was talking about 78 or 79. And we didn't get video stores here until a little bit later in the 80s. I don't know when they necessarily first popped up in other bigger cities or whatever, but we didn't even have that option. So it was like if it didn't come on TV or you get the TV guide and flip through it and hope you find something cool like that.
Yeah.
And you weren't watching it until it did. Until video stores came along for me, a few years later.
So my point is, people of our age, like that's how we would have watched not only these things for the first time probably, but these are the ones you would have watched the most of because these are the ones that were kind of safe to air, right? They didn't have to really edit these for TV or anything like that. So you watched Creature from the Black Lagoon, Frankenstein, Dracula, and all that kind of shit. Mm-hmm. So this, if you wanted to watch a horror movie, this is what you saw.
And speaking of that, I remember this was a little bit later on. There was video stores at this point. And I don't remember exactly what year, but I remember the cool gimmicks would Creature, might have been Creature from the Black Lagoon. I definitely remember the second. What was the Creature? The second of the Creature films. I can't think of the name of the full name of it, but it was the one that was in 3D, and they would play it on 3D on TV, and you'd have to go to your local whatever, food line, whatever grocery store or somewhere, and you pick up the glasses. It would be this little kit that you would get or whatever, and then you watch it in 3D. And if you didn't have the glasses, it was the old school 3D, so you couldn't even. It wasn't even watchable if you didn't have the 3D glass.
Yeah.
So there's cool little gimmicks like that they used to do at drive-in theaters that later on, I guess they would do on TV movies and stuff.
I'm sure plenty of people's eyesight was fucked up trying to watch a 3D movie without the glasses. Makes you feel like you're going cockeyed. Like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, the old red and blue where it's just looks like blurry images if you're watching it without the 3D glasses. Yeah.
So I'm sure we all have a similar history. It sounds like, with this, like we don't really remember the first time, but it's probably one of the early ones. So, and I'm sure that's the story of a lot of people with this type of flick. This one debuted February 12th, 1931 in New York City. I actually saw another date that was actually slightly earlier that I thought was kind of random. I think it was on IMDb that listed it as debuting February 9th of 1931 and of all places, Asheville, North Carolina. So according to IMDb, there was a showing of this thing 3 days prior than New York City in fucking Asheville, North Carolina. So go figure.
And advanced screening in Asheville, North Carolina for Dracula.
What the hell? It must have been I don't even know. Drive-ins 1931, right? That wouldn't have been a thing, right?
No. That's something that we need to do a spotlight on later in the future. I remember looking it up before, but I don't remember the exact dates, but it's definitely well before.
Yeah. So this is when legitimate theater was still more of a thing, right? Vaudeville, that type of thing. So you're coming out of, you're literally coming out of silent film here in 1931. Honestly, sound pictures, talkies or whatever, they're more rare than silent in this time period, right? This would have been a advanced kind of movie in 1931, I would think. Not many before this.
Yeah, we're just talking maybe 2 years before silent.
Yeah.
Before the talking
You're
started,
this is early,
1929 or so, or 1930 before they really got going. So,
But it was actually released properly on Valentine's Day, 1931, February 14th, 1931. Of course, this was made and distributed by Universal Pictures, and there is no rating because this is pre-code. This is pre-Hays Code. So we did the whole deep dive. I don't even remember what episode that was. That was a while back. That was years ago. But we did a whole deep dive. Smoke and I did one time into the kind of the history of the rating system, right? So that was this was during that time period where it was like, all right, we're coming out of silent film. You're just now getting the first sound pictures, and there was a lot of the movies that were being made were kind of racy because they could finally talk, so they were saying and doing things that a lot of people didn't approve of. So that's why they basically had to enact the Hays Code and then the rating system that eventually, right, became what we know and love today. But I don't know about love, but
yeah,
that we know and exist today. How about that?
That we're subjected to today.
Yeah, exactly. So there was a few year the point is there was probably a few years window there in the late 20s to early 30s where like there's probably some racier stuff than you would think if you go back and watch that stuff, you know.
Yeah, especially in the more outside of Hollywood type movies. I think within the studio system, they kind of adhered to certain norms or societal norms that they like. For instance, I don't know if y'all ever seen the Mexican version of Dracula that was shot on the same exact sets.
Yeah, I've never seen it, but I did notice that in the research I was doing for this, that they did it like they basically shot that at night when they weren't filming this one, right?
Yeah. So yeah, these same set didn't have any of the same actors. You know, of course, Bela Lugosi they had their own actors and everything. But if you were to watch, I mean, I don't know if it's still included on some of these releases. I would assume so. But I remember on the DVD release that I first bought of Dracula, it had both versions, the American and the Mexican one. And I watched the Mexican one, almost back to back when I watched Dracula from that disc the first time. And you can see like they don't have those same sorts of moral norms within the studio system in Mexico at the same time period. So it was a bit racier if you watch the Mexican version of Dracula than it is the American version. Yeah. When it comes to the brides of Dracula, they get a little bit more. Their outfits are a bit more revealing. There's a bit more of that sexuality that you would kind of expect with the Dracula, that type of romantic vampire movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I did see something where there was some stuff in there that they didn't do in this one. Although it's not a shot-for-shot kind of movie, but yeah, there were some more things going on in that one than this one because of, just the, things that were going on in society and whatever. I guess they had a governor on it, so to speak. Like they didn't go buck wild.
They didn't have the code. I guess, but big movies like this made in the Hollywood system still kind of adhered to a code.
Yeah.
That were a lot racier when you got outside of Hollywood into the more independent movies, which is mainly why they, I think, came up with that Hays Code, because these independent films were pushing Hollywood out, so to speak, because you could go see these things. It was a shock value to these other movies that you didn't get at the Hollywood movies. And so I think that's when they enacted the Hays Code, because they were starting to get outsold, I think, by some of these independent movies. Because of that shock value, you could go see stuff you couldn't see in these other, mainstream movies or whatever.
Like almost anything, money is at the root, right?
Yeah.
Almost anything. Total runtime of this one is 1 hour and 15 minutes. So this is obviously the time before everything was an hour and a half or more, right? IMDb listed as a drama, fantasy, horror, and it was filmed there, like we mentioned, back to back with that other Dracula, the Mexican Dracula that came out the same year. But it was filmed there in Universal City, California, which is, where Universal made all their flicks, especially back then, for a budget of just around $341,000. And of course, you don't have specific box office numbers because 90 fucking years ago, right? But I did see somewhere where they said that it basically in the end ended up making, give or take, around $700,000 profit. So I assume that means it made roughly about $1 million or so dollars, at the time.
Yeah.
Which is
which you would think is pretty damn good for 1931, right?
Yeah, you would think. I mean, because back then the only measure you got is really like how many tickets they sold, and how much would a ticket have been back then? Maybe a nickel, So do the math. Yeah. So it looks like they made about $1 million roughly on this. So successful for sure. The reason that this thing looks kind of like a play or a stage play is because basically it is. It's based on the 1924 stage play, that was written by Hamilton Dean and John L. Balderston. So that's where you get a lot of the differences between, say, remember when we watched Bram Stoker's Dracula a few weeks back? And then, you know, when you compare that to, say, this, and then you throw in the actual Bram Stoker's novel, Dracula, you'll see a lot of differences, and some of them are subtle. I mean, the basic outline of the story is the same, right? But there's a lot of differences here. Specifically, I'd say the biggest difference is, to me, the dumbing down of the character Harker.
Yeah.
He
definitely plays a much smaller role in this version than he does in the novel itself, or in further, you know, more elaborate Dracula versions later.
To me, it's like they decided to take certain elements of Harker and give them to Renfield. It's like they beefed up the part of Renfield, right? Like by
that guy's great. Dwight Frye plays Renfield, and that's a fantastic role. Yeah,
that laugh, dude. That would unnerve and scare the shit out of you, though, if you saw some dude just coming at you going. Which reminds me, they did say that like a big part of the sell, the way they promoted this movie, was the fact that apparently there were people that were like passing out and shit when they watched this movie.
Yeah, I mean, it was in those early days. It was among the first, and I don't know, and like again, the history, somebody can point this out to us, but I mean, it's definitely among the first talkie horror movies.
Yeah,
I mean, you had plenty of horror element related silent films, but most of the times they were melodramas that had gothic horror elements in it, but they weren't necessarily, like, maybe with the exception of Phantom of the Opera, where they had those kind of, you might call it jump scares when this Phantom gets revealed, in the silent Phantom of the Opera movie. But they weren't necessarily making people pass out until, I guess, the talkies came along, and they can manipulate sound and all that stuff too.
I remember seeing something somewhere in some of the stuff that I was reading about, like, there being another one, like another talking, maybe it was the Cat and the Canary. No, that's silent. That was silent. Yeah. I'm wrong about that. But it
was initially silent, but I think they did do a remake of Cat and the Canary at the talkie era, but I don't remember what year.
Yeah, I mean, like, you're literally like splitting the difference of a few years here, where like everything was silent, and all of a sudden, there was the talkie. Yeah. So, like, I don't know exactly what would have come first, but if this ain't the first, it's got to be one of the, like, what?
That's got to be one of them. I mean, they did do a lot of remakes. Well, more than a handful of the popular silent films. Whenever talkies came along, they wanted to kind of, hey, we can do this now and have audio in it. So they did that with, like I said, that Cat and the Canary, and a few other movies that were, even Todd Browning, the director of Dracula, made some, of course, made movies in the silent era, and he made a couple. I can't remember the names of it right now that he remade later as a talkie. Even one that had Lon Chaney Sr. in it. The only talkie with Lon Chaney Sr. I just can't think of the name of it right now.
This movie was actually the original version that I guess would have been seen in 1931 was actually a little bit longer. One of the, apparently that had something to do with the production codes that were eventually applied to this one years later. So they did cut a few things out. And one of the biggest differences apparently from the original that I guess you wouldn't see now or don't see now is that, remember when we watched Frankenstein, there was like that guy that was standing in front of the curtain kind of warning you or whatever, like what you're about to see.
Yeah.
Apparently they had that, a similar gimmick for this. And then I guess years later they cut that out, and now I guess that's just gone. Like, as far as I can tell, that just doesn't exist in any version that you would see anymore. So in 1931, you would have seen that. So just like in Frankenstein, I think we talked about, like, that would have set the mood. You go into the theater, you're probably already on edge because you're about to see something that's scary, and then this dude stands up on the stage and kind of warns you, So that would probably, you could imagine between that and then everything that happens in the movie, people just passing out left and right, like from I guess maybe the shock or just the scares and everything, right? You could see it happening. Although I believe that was played up by the studios, though. Like, it's not like there were people dropping left and right. It's probably just happened a few times, and then they're like, "Oh, watch out! This is the one that knock your socks off." That kind of.
Well, that just goes to show some things never change. Like, they still do that.
Yeah. Yeah, like one thing that always kind of stuck out to me was just the lighting, how effective the lighting was, because you didn't really have much music here.
Yeah.
And there wasn't, any sort of music kind of build up or, any sort of.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
so much so to years later, like a long time later, I think I saw it was in the late 90s, they actually commissioned a guy to compose a musical score for the movie. So I'm assuming this was released. It says that one came out in 1999 in VHS, and then apparently the Universal DVD of the time allowed you as a viewer to choose between the unscored soundtrack or this new score that they added in. So that would be interesting to go check that version out, because I don't,
Yeah.
just to see how
I need to
it
check
adds or
this
subtracts.
and see if I have that.
Yeah, it might.
That
It might
might.
be. I don't know how often that has been included in years since, but apparently in 1999 that was a thing. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's like Don was saying, it's only got one song, which is Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake, that plays in the opening credits.
Yeah.
At various points, I think they're at an opera, right? That when they're attending the opera or whatever, then so you hear some snippets of the opera playing. But that's not the soundtrack necessarily.
yeah, that's just ambient music at best, right?
And that's really it, I think. And at the end, right? They did the very end. There's a little bit of music out cue or whatever.
Yeah, there might have been something after. Yeah, at the very
Notes
very
after
end,
the-
because there's no, like, this is old school, so there's no proper end credits. It's just kind of like,
No.
I think it just
Yeah.
says the end or end, and then this has been a Universal picture or whatever the hell it said.
Yeah, they usually had the front end credits, which were like
Yeah.
the main major names on like some backdrop, whatever, like gothic. For this movie, it was like a vampire gothic looking bat thing or whatever, right? And with the Tchaikovsky track playing. So and that I guess kind of is also part of the play element of this movie. Like you said, it's based on a play, so that kind of puts it in that mode too, where you don't have, unless you had an orchestra in the pit during the play, you didn't really have music much then either for those. So it definitely adds to that staginess of it.
This was directed and co-produced by Todd Browning. Now, Todd Browning, I mean, there's a number of things that you may or may not have heard his name attached to. Probably the biggest ones would have been, Smug, I think you've talked about this one a number of times, Freaks from 1932.
Yeah, that's his most notorious one, at least the one that got him into some trouble and stuff because of him using actual circus freaks. Yeah. I mean, the literal people that had issues, people that they would use for circus freaks at the time. There was no special effects or anything. So that was the most controversial thing about it, I think, is the fact that he used real ones, and it didn't, for the longest time, I think it was banned in a lot of theaters and didn't get a proper re-release until the 60s, I think.
Yeah, he didn't do much past Freaks, to be honest with you. Like Dracula, the Iron Man, and then Freaks. And then
that killed his career pretty much.
Basically, yeah, because like he directed a couple of uncredited flicks, Fast Workers and The Devil Doll a few years later. He made Mark of the Vampire in 1935 and then Miracles for Sale in 1939. That's it. And he didn't pass away until 1962, so clearly, yeah, he was done after Freaks for the most part.
Now, one, I might as well mention it here because I did look it up, but that Lon Chaney movie, Todd Browning made a movie in 1925 called The Unholy Three, which I definitely recommend. That's very, very great, very good film.
Mm-hmm.
It's got horror elements, but it deals with his more, that circus thing. He was a carny. I mean, he worked with a carny and stuff I forget exactly what he did for them. But that's where the Freaks thing and a bunch of his other movies that are taking place in a circus, that's where that element came from. So The Unholy Three takes place in a circus like that, and there's melodrama and horror elements and all that. It was remade in 1930 with Lon Chaney, and that was his only speaking role that I was talking about earlier. I had to look it up. But it wasn't that movie wasn't directed by Todd Browning. The remake was somebody else. But
unfortunately, he made a movie that no longer can be seen, which could be considered one of the greatest movies that probably most people on this earth have never seen, and that's London After Midnight, right? The lost silent film.
That is one of the most unfortunate things in horror. Of that being they've tried to piece it back together with the little surviving pieces of film elements that they have from it, and then somebody drawing some other. I mean, I haven't seen it, but it's like a 15 or 20 minute retelling, I guess, of it with the existing stills and stuff that they have from it. So, unfortunately, that's everybody's seen that image, even if you don't know it right now by name. London After Midnight. Trust me, you've seen the image of Lon Chaney in the makeup, which basically kind of looks like a Jack the Ripper meets Jekyll and Hyde kind of look.
Mecca was not the figure.
Oh, really? They did, or they're going to?
I think they're going to.
Okay, yeah, that'll be sweet. Yeah, like you often always hear people say like, "Man, if a time machine were real, what would you go back and do?" Like, well, I go buy Apple stock and be a billionaire, right? So, like, yeah, I might would do those things, right? But I would want to go back and try to save these lost movies. Hey, let's go get a couple copies of this movie that's been gone for like the last 80, 90 years.
Yeah. I don't remember what the story was. I think I might have read about it, how it, but it might have been one of those ones that was burned up in a warehouse. You remember there was a warehouse fire that they used to, these films were like nitrate, right?
Yeah.
And it's very, very highly flammable.
Yep.
Smallest little thing set it off, and it's like a warehouse fire. And I think this is one of those that some of its reels were lost due to that.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure.
Just a quick glance. Yeah, it was the last known copy of the movie was destroyed in the 1965 MGM vault fire.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And it took it out. So at least probably since the early 60s, I guess, nobody has been able to watch this movie. And I don't know how viewed it was even before then, but that's a shame.
Keep holding out hope. You cross your fingers that somewhere it'll be found again. Like some crappy print, at least some version of it. I don't even care if it's like
there was
barely watchable. It's some kind
there
of
was
version
something
somewhere
that I don't remember whether it was back in our old Deadline Horror News days or another movie we were talking about, something like this. But I remember reading a story once where there was some church or something, or maybe it was like a VFW hall or something like that, right? It was one of those type of old public places where they ripped up the stage to remodel this place, and underneath the stage they found a bunch of old posters. I'm talking like silent movie stuff, like fucking 70, 80, 90 years old. Posters, other stuff, and they found some films. And one of the films was a movie that was considered lost. I don't remember what it was. I'm sure somewhere out there you can Google it and figure it out. But yeah, so there's always hope that like maybe some random bingo hall out in Indiana somewhere might have stashed a copy of this thing underneath the stage, and you never know.
Yeah. Somebody's using that film reel canister as, I don't know, as a coffee table thing or something, as a tray table.
Yeah. So maybe somewhere out there's a copy of it, but only time will tell. But this, of course, was, like we said, based on the stage play written by Hamilton Dean and John L. Balderston, and, of course, the novel Dracula written by Bram Stoker. So that's completely what this is based on, is that stage play for the most part. It's almost like, let's take the book and change it up for a stage play, and then like apparently they wanted to make a bigger screen adaptation of it that would have been, say, more comparable at the time to Hunchback of Notre Dame and Phantom of the Opera, which had come out, say, roughly 5 to 10 years before that. Those were grander in scale. They wanted it to be something like that, but then I guess they couldn't quite figure out how to make this as grand as that. So then he just kind of dumbed it down to the stage play version, for lack of a better way of phrasing it.
Which I believe Lugosi had already been playing Dracula in the stage version of it.
Yeah, and the guy that played Van Helsing.
And Van Helsing.
Edward Van Sloan. He had played Van Helsing. If not in that same stage play version from 1924, whatever it was. It could have been that one or a different version, but apparently, he had played Van Helsing before this.
Which that probably helped them, too. I mean, they were already familiar with that stage play version of it. So,
yeah, I want to say Dwight Fry as Renfield was the only major difference in the main cast. There was another guy that played Renfield in the stage play, but they got Dwight Fry instead. And then apparently Helen Chandler, who played Mina, she was different. She was a mostly really young, unknown actress at the time who they, put in the role of Mina. But otherwise, I think there was a lot of similarities to the cast of that stage play to this. So you're right. And probably in the translation of it, that helped out a lot. Let's just get the people that know it, make more lavish sets and put it on film. There you go.
And then I think it plays like the stage plays like the stage play, but it's stagey because of the cameras. They're just steady. They're just plant the camera. I mean, now this is not just Dracula. Most of the movies around this time didn't have any kind of elaborate camera moves or anything, and especially it's coming from the silent era, which had none. They just plant the camera there and close up where the actors would stand on their X where they needed to be, a medium, long close up shot or whatever. So this kind of carries that over, except in the very intro, which I think is one of the strongest scenes in the movie. I think is the intro of this, where it's in Dracula's castle, right? And and you're getting the coffins and these bats and rats and animals, and the camera does kind of move then and pan and whatnot. So, but other than that, it's mostly just sedentary. So that also helps. It kind of I don't know if it helps or hinders or whatever, but it makes it more stagey.
Yeah,
like,
it definitely looks like it definitely has a look of like you're watching a play, in a lot in a good portion of the movie. And some others that some scenes it doesn't, but for the most part, it definitely plays like that. Which I mean isn't a horrible thing. No. It doesn't. I don't think it deters from the final product. But
no, it's definitely what you expect from the time. I mean, you don't expect elaborate camera moves in 1931.
yeah, they're just figuring it out. They're probably, honestly, let's be honest, in 1931, you're more amazed that you're hearing people talk.
Yeah, that's the big draw.
Yeah, like, who gives a fuck what it looks like? Like, they're talking and I can hear them. Holy shit.
Yeah.
I believe I've seen, too, like, there was a lot of people at the time that didn't think the talking pictures would ever take off. Like, no, this is just like, I guess like they looked at it like a gimmick, like a 3D type gimmick. Or something. Yeah, this will never take off. Silence the way to go.
I mean, it's true that they had to. I mean, I'm sure this must have happened plenty of times where you had a fantastic silent actor or actress who could emote in their facial expressions and do all this stuff, but as soon as you heard their voice, you're like, this isn't going to work. This person can't. Their voice isn't right. Can't act in the voice acting or whatever. So I'm sure that had to happen.
One of the original. Apparently, this movie was not intended for Bela Lugosi to play Dracula. It was intended for Conrad Veidt, who had just been in The Man Who Laughs for Universal, and and apparently he was German, and apparently he felt that his English wasn't good enough to do talkies, so. He basically checked out. I guess went back to Germany or whatever. And and
by the way, he's watching this who doesn't know of that movie, The Man Who Laughed. The image of Conrad Veidt and that is kind of one of the inspirations for the Joker.
Oh, dude, what do you mean one of the inspirations? Dude, you look at that, and then look at especially the early concepts and drawings of the Joker, and you tell me.
Oh yeah,
that Bob Kane and Bill Finger or whatever that did. Yeah, they definitely were a fan of that movie.
Oh, yeah.
There's no question of that. But, yeah, that would have been interesting if Conrad Veidt had been, I don't know, because Bela Lugosi's accent was pretty odd,
just had
right, for this.
The proper Romanian, proper for Dracula, Romanian accent.
The funny thing is, too, when I was looking up some of the, background stuff and all this, is that how many of the people that were, I guess, involved, or a lot of the actors that were in this thing, basically just shit all over this thing for years and years after this. They were just like it was almost like they were embarrassed that they were a part of it in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Even to some degree, Bela Lugosi was, like, I guess when he would talk about it, or when, whatever, like, because that was one of the things, right? He didn't want to be pigeonholed, typecast.
Yeah.
So like, I think he even kind of shit on it years afterwards, but like, the guy that played Van Helsing, he years later, he like, yeah, what the fuck was that? They all like, and there was a number of other people that I think even the lady that played Mina that we were talking about, she had some negative things to say about it years later.
That kind of carries on from that time period. I mean, you're talking about in the silent era, like I said, you didn't really have genres. They weren't really talking about genres. They were talking about, it was just all melodrama, and you had various aspects of genre. You might have a little bit of comedy.
Yeah,
Buster Keaton or whatever, or you might have a little bit of what they didn't even call horror. I don't know what they would necessarily call it, and gothic elements and stuff or whatever. So it really wasn't until talkies that you get fully fleshed genres coming along, and so horror right there from the beginning was kind of shat upon, right, looked down on, and still that way to the day. I mean, try getting a horror movie, a straightforward horror movie into the Oscars. They gotta go around it in some way, like Silence of the Lambs was a thriller, right? It wasn't a horror movie; it was a thriller. It was a psychological thriller.
Yeah, it has to be. It has to be almost transcendent, like Bram Stoker's Dracula or something like that, to really get any kind of serious consideration for anything. And even then, it's usually like you said, it'll be special effects or so it'll be some other subcategory Oscar. It won't be it won't be Best Picture or anything like that.
It's intermission time. Time to pause and refresh at the snack bar. During this short break, you can treat your taste of good food and sparkling cold beverages, including delicious Coca-Cola. If you're hot dog hungry, we have them. Sizzling, juicy hot dogs served in warm, oven-fresh buns. Plus a complete menu of all your favorites. Visit the Refreshment Center now. Enjoy delicious food and ice-cold Coca-Cola.
For you, the listeners of the All-American Spookshow podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. So I hopped on over to audible.com and I just typed in Dracula. And I think we've done this a time or two here during the summer, but there's plenty of stuff there. If you just type in the word Dracula, you're going to see tons. Obviously, like a number of variations of just the Bram Stoker's, original classic. But there are plenty of other ones. We've got Lucy Undying, a Dracula novel by Kirsten White. That one's about 10 and a half hours long. So that has an interesting, I'm assuming it's something focusing on the character of Lucy. I'm not sure, but that could be interesting. We've got, what is this? The Real History of Dracula by Sarah Cleto, Brittany Warman, The Great Courses. That one's almost 4.5 hours long. So Donnie, that sounds like it's right up your alley. And then we, man, there's just tons of, surprise, just tons of Bram Stoker versions. There's even let's see, Dracula, a BBC Radio 4 reading starring Michael Fassbender. And that's, I guess, him reading Bram Stoker's Dracula, I guess, or some version of it. Well, I guess he must not be reading the whole thing because it's only 2 hours and 12 minutes. So radio play type version of it, I guess. So, tons. I mean, I've literally got I just typed in Dracula and I got back 498 results on Audible. So plenty to choose from. So if you want to go check those out, go to audibletrial.com/spookshow. Again, that's audibletrial.com/spookshow for your free audiobooks. Now I'm going to hop back over to IMDb and click on plot summaries. Surely we've got a nice long one so we can explain it, help Donnie understand what he watched here, right? Oh, well, we've got the obvious short one, then we do have one, like, not super long one, but we got the longer one, so I'll read that one. Short one. Transylvanian vampire Count Dracula bends a naive real estate agent to his will, then takes up residence at a London estate, where he sleeps in his coffin by day and searches for potential victims by night. That's the simple explanation of what's going on here. But we need more. And for that, we're going to look to Dud Sederberg. They're on IMDb, and he writes, after a harrowing ride through the Carpathian Mountains in Eastern Europe, Renfield enters Castle Dracula to finalize the transferal of Carfax Abbey in London to Count Dracula, who is in actuality a vampire. Renfield is drugged by the eerily hypnotic Count and turned into one of his thralls, protecting him during his sea voyage to London. After sucking the blood and turning the young Lucy Weston into a vampire, Dracula turns his attention to her friend Mina Seward, daughter of Dr. Seward, who then calls in a specialist, Dr. Van Helsing, to diagnose the sudden deterioration of Mina's health. Van Helsing, realizing that Dracula is indeed a vampire, tries to prepare Mina's fiancé, John Harker, and Dr. Seward for what is to come and the measures that will have to be taken to prevent Mina from becoming one of the undead. Yeah, especially in this movie, and I never really felt that way, like reading the book back in the day, or even in Bram Stoker's Dracula, because they made it feel like it made a little bit more sense. But Van Helsing in this one seemed to be too conveniently knowledgeable of everything. In a lot of ways, it's like he just knows everything. I've never really dealt with this, but fuck, I know it all. I know what will take this guy out. I know what he is. Like the only explanation is that he's a doctor. That's why he knows these things.
Must be, I'm a doctor.
Yeah. And I think there's some line in there somewhere where he's like, I'm a doctor or a scientist, what do you say, researcher or scientist of the unusual? Like, basically, I look at shit nobody else looks at, so I know a bunch. It seemed a bit too convenient at times. That being said, though, I think he's still pretty good, but you're well into the movie before he pops up, right? Like, solid 30, 40 minutes in, right? And then before Van Helsing shows his face.
Yeah. And it's only about an hour. And what was it? An hour and
hour 15.
10 minutes, a little bit left?
I think
hour 15.
Yeah. But you get plenty of them in that back half, though.
Yeah.
Not that any of that's a bad thing. It just felt a little too convenient to me, or maybe a little too convenient, I meant, that he just knew so much, I love the, at the very beginning of the movie when Renfield is going to, meet with Dracula. And, of course he mentions like, I'm going to go visit Dracula at the Borgo Pass, or I gotta get to the Borgo Pass and it's going to take me up to Dracula. And then all the townspeople They're like basically hissing and spitting at him and crossing themselves. And I just love the reactions of the townspeople when he says like, "Oh, I'm just going up there. What's the problem?" And then they're like praying for him, like, you know, like, here, take the blessings as you go. You know, not much tops though when he's on that carriage to go there, and Dracula. Obviously, we know it's Dracula, right? That's driving the carriage. Yeah. But then he turns into a bat, and then it's essentially the bat driving the carriage. But it's not really like driving the carriage; it's just kind of a bat leading the horses. Like they just kind of they kind of put a fake bat over the horses. Like, yep, he's driving it. Then when Renfield leans out to like complain,
have the reins, and he
yeah, that would have been awesome. Like you just see a bat in the seat holding the holding the reins, except it's the bat from Dracula.
Where's that movie at?
Yeah, that was pretty good though. Like, and it's also funny too how there was like there's not a lot of. I mean, obviously it's a pretty straightforward like drama horror movie, right? But there are moments of levity or some, you know, comical, maybe comic relief or something with that. The guy that's like the caretaker for Renfield at the psych hospital or whatever you want to call it, the nut house, whatever he's in.
Yeah.
That guy's hilarious. Because he's the one that just like, you know, doesn't believe anything that Renfield is saying. I mean, I guess why would you, right? But like everything Renfield's saying is like he's pretty much telling you what's going on. But this guy's like, yeah, me too, buddy. You know, I just love his reaction to everything. Donnie, you mentioned it earlier though. That intro of Dracula and then the brides, you kind of get that wide shot of Dracula coming out. But I think you see the brides first and then him, right? But just the scope of that and everything, it's just really like it's well shot and well done, right?
Yeah,
and they don't say a fucking word.
Yeah, I mean it's 1930?
Yeah,
or 1931 or whenever they shot it at. It was, 94 years, it still holds up.
You mentioned the lighting too. How about Dracula on
it's
always on his eyes.
Those little pencil spotlights.
I'm wondering how they. I mean, I'm sure it's not, you know, reinventing the wheel to do that, but I wonder how much, like, how bright that would have been in his eyes. Would it have been off to the side where he's not looking straight at it or something? I'm just thinking of the crude old way of doing things. Like, how would they have done that? Well, you know, maybe made it really dark around him so it stands out more, so it's not piercing his eyeballs out of his face,
burning his retina.
Yeah, because especially back then, those things would have ran hot.
Piercing eyeballs out of his face, and he's like got permanent retinal damage after that.
Yeah. Because back then, those things.
I don't know
hot.
if they had those at that time, but there's these little scrims, light diffusers that you could still.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe something like that.
Yeah, to where like I said, it wouldn't burn his eyeballs out of a skull.
Yeah. No,
well, you know that you just reminded me. You know how in every movie, pretty much ever made, if you look at the credits, there's a Foley artist. That's the sound effects and stuff, right? Basically.
Yeah.
This movie was actually the guy that was the Foley artist was Jack Foley himself.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
The nickname of Foley artist comes from Jack Foley. He's the dude that did it in this movie. So, you know. Also, you know, we pointed out with basically no score in this movie, that he had a big hand in making this what it was because there was no score, right? Because they do have to lean into that sound design in this movie. Like, I had a pretty good, sound system going when I was listening to it, man. Like, you know, there's some pretty good, you know, for 1931 and one of the first types of these movies, man, there's some pretty good sound effects, and you could hear things that weren't happening on the screen and stuff like that, you know, so he did a great job. But just the fact that, like, the dude that, you know, Jack Foley himself was the Foley artist in this movie. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, and like you said, too, about the music, the reason we'd already mentioned that, but the reason why they didn't have a soundtrack to not to all, but to most of these movies in those early days of talkies is because they didn't think audiences would buy people talking and then for no reason there's music playing. You know what I mean? Like they didn't get the concept yet at the time of a soundtrack. The only reason they had orchestras and stuff before is so it wouldn't be deadly silent. You know, it's just silent films. You know, they would have an orchestra in the pit in these movie theaters playing along.
Yeah, that's
with
what I was going to say.
action.
So correct me if I'm wrong. That's the way silent film worked. Was like there was literally no sound, right? There would always be someone there in the room playing the music. Correct.
Yeah, there would be a live orchestra pit. So how many? I guess it depended on how many they could pay or whatever. As to how many instruments.
Yeah, so it could be anything from like a full on like mini orchestra to like an organist or something, right?
Piano,
just a pianist, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it. So yeah,
They,
before
the
this, yeah,
screen title cards for dialogue, you know.
so you're right.
And
If
that
you
was
look
it.
at if you look at it from that perspective, you're right. Like they'll be like, well, there's nobody down in the orchestra pit playing this music. Where the fuck is that music coming from? You know?
Because you can hear it now. There's people talking. It's not silence. They're talking. So why do you need music bed underlay? And then they get later on, they get the concept of atmosphere and creating atmosphere and all that stuff. But that's why some of these early movies didn't have. I mean, it didn't take long. I mean, it didn't take long at all. More than a year or two, maybe, before most movies started underscoring films with a soundtrack.
And then,
because I think even Frankenstein, when that came out, I'm pretty sure didn't Frankenstein have music throughout it? I'm pretty sure it did. Yeah.
Yeah, you mean it did, or that there was little? Because I don't remember. There was some, but I don't remember it being.
Yeah, maybe not
standing
throughout,
out.
but there was
Yeah.
more than just this movie where it was just at the
Yeah.
beginning. I think
Yeah.
there's a couple of cues here or there or whatever.
Then you pretty early on is when you get the quote, the Bela Lugosi Dracula quote. You know, listen to them, the children of the night. That what music they make. That's just a classic bit. Like if you don't
we
know,
used to have that on the show opening.
Yeah, one point or another we dropped it in there, but that's just a classic horror line, right? Like
word for word by Gary Oldman in the movie we just watched not too long ago. The Bram Stoker's Dracula. Yeah. Word for word.
Yeah, well, if you're gonna do Dracula proper, that one's got to be in there, right?
Yeah, it's got to be.
Yeah, it's almost like whatever the in the Wolfman. The whole speech by the gypsy lady, when the wolf bane, whatever the hell she said, like there's just certain things that have to be there.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of those things. I wonder why they changed the name of the ship in this. Did you notice the name of the ship that brought Dracula from Transylvania to London? Yeah. It was called the Vesta.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be the Demeter. I mean, the novel and every other version.
Yeah,
that I know.
Demeter. So I wonder why. I mean, I didn't look into that at all, but I wonder why they changed it for this. I mean, it's such a small thing that it seems purposeful, It almost seems that, like, there's no reason to change it, so why change it? So that means there had to be a reason that they changed it. So I don't know exactly what that was, but that was one. And of course, it plays in where, like, you don't really, some shit goes down on that ship, but you don't see a bunch of it go down. And I think they said, that shot that they do have of you can see some guys, like, fighting the storm on the ship. You see a bunch of people milling about on the ship. That was from another movie. And I don't remember what that movie was, but they just straight up lifted those scenes from that movie, slapped them in here, and then did some stuff with Renfield and Dracula kind of over on the side. So that's just some clever editing is all you're getting there. Of course, you get all the tropes, the Dracula stuff where he looks in the mirror, there's no reflection, except that they didn't do a full mirror thing. They just had like this little, what was it, like a jewelry box or something that opened up and there's a mirror in it. And you don't see his reflection, and he just goes over and slaps the thing out of the guy's hand. Van Helsing, right? Fuck you. Bah! I just get upset by mirrors. What kind of excuse is that? I just don't like mirrors. Why, good heavens, would you do that, man? Fuck mirrors, that's why. So I guess they kind of go with the same thing here where, like, he doesn't make Renfield, like, Renfield's not full vampire, right? Like, he just... Does he make him crazy, or does he, like, give him enough of the vampire juju to where, like, he kind of wants to be one? I mean, what exactly does he do to him here? Because, like...
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like the other Renfields, right? In the kind of a novel where, I mean, I don't know if it's really fully explained the vampire lore of him, but the way I get it is that he's... Yeah, like you said, he's got enough of his... I don't know if he drank from him or whatever the case may be, but he's not full vampire, of course, but he's eating bugs and spiders and all that, and would want to eat rats and even humans, or
That was
so I don't know if he's partially turned. I guess I don't know.
It's like he turned him just enough to where, like, he has the flavor for it, but he's not quite there yet. So he could get Renfield to do things for him, maybe.
Yeah.
I guess that's the conclusion you come to, and you just roll with it. But because he bites Lucy, Dracula comes in, bites Lucy, turns her into a vampire, correct? And then you kind of get that half measure thing with Mina again, right? Where, like, I don't think she fully turns, right, but she's about to. So it's similar to other versions that we've seen there. before they,
Yeah.
finally save the day or whatever. But a lot of stuff happens off screen here too. Even like you see Dracula kind of go in for the bite, but you never see him do anything, right? There's no blood in this movie.
Yeah,
like
he's also not wearing fangs.
Yeah, you're right.
You never see it.
You just kind of see him go like, almost like hypnotize somebody, like, and they'll just kind of stare at him, and then he'll go in and on the throat, and then like that's all you see. Or they go around the corner or something, right? Like you don't see anything happen, but you just kind of put two and two together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know for sure of this, but I do remember hearing something about the fact that it had to do with it being too risque of a thing at the time, too much sexuality of him going in to bite her on the neck or something. It was just some sort of, it was just too much for that time period. Like,
they'd be appalled today.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah. Lots of pearl clutching going. Oh,
just wait till they see vampires.
Yeah, shit. And that might be the first and only time you've heard anyone compare Bela Lugosi's Dracula to vampires from 1974 or whatever that was. Rats. You promised me the rats. What was he? He's just going on and on about the rats. I love that. Yeah, I mean, like the only other than the caretaker that I thought was maybe it just caught me as funny. Towards the end, when the bat, it's Dracula, obviously, comes into the room or he's at the doorway or something, and Mina starts talking. She's talking to the bat. Oh, yes. Yes. I just thought that was hilarious because they're like, who the fuck are you talking to? Oh, don't worry about it. Oh, nothing. Like, she's just talking to a bat. Like, she understands what he's saying. But, of course, it eventually leads to Dracula, for whatever reason, killing Renfield. I guess there was no particular reason other than Renfield talking too much. So Dracula kills him and just tosses him down those fucking... That's an epic staircase, by the way, isn't it? That's like a 100-flight staircase that they're fighting on there toward the end. Jesus. But he just kind of chokes him out and tosses him down the stairway, so Renfield's dead. And then somewhat disappointing, I think, ending to me when, you get the final thing where, like, I guess Dracula kind of retreats back to the coffin or whatever, and then Van Helsing goes over there and stakes him, and you don't see any of it, though, right? Like, you see he's about to go over there, and then you hear, oh, you hear the death moans or whatever the hell, and that's it. Like, you don't see it happen. And then Mina is saved. She's now that Dracula's gone, the curse is broken or whatever, and then Harker gives her a hug, the end, right? Literally, like, the end. That's it. So, like, it's somewhat, in some ways, anticlimactic because you don't see, like, a final showdown because it kind of happens off camera. But still, you get the point.
Yeah.
Such as 1931, right? So... I guess there you go. That's Dracula from 1931. So, Donnie, you brought it to the table, so I guess we'll let you go first. What are your thoughts and what's your star rating on this one?
Oh man, this is a certified classic. Sets, love the lighting. Bela Lugosi's his portrayal of, even though we talked about Nosferatu being like 1922, whatever it was, or 22. Before that, this is what his portrayal is what other Dracula characters are based off of.
Yeah.
You've got Christopher Lee in the Hammer films, Count Chocula. You've got the Count.
I mean, you're not
Sesame Street.
wrong, but what the hell?
Yeah, I thought you'd like that. Yeah. No, yeah. So I've always loved this movie. I still love it. I'm gonna go 4 1/4.
Tiana, what do you say?
Well, this is pretty much the beginning of all the great movies that Universal ended up making. And Bela Lugosi is just, I don't know, every time, you think of Dracula, that's the number one person that you think of.
Oh, yeah.
This is definitely rewatchable. I give it a 4.
Smoke, what do you say?
Yeah, I pretty much echo all the sentiments so far said. And now, for some reason, I'm craving Count Chocula. But
shit.
But yeah, it's classic. It's if you had to get any negatives about it, I guess it would be the staginess, right? Because it was based on a play. That's not the fault of the movie. It was just based on a play. And of the time period of like we're talking about the cameras being steady and no real camera movements, but like that's just again part of the time period. They were still feeling things out here and what they could do, especially because of it being a talkie. I think all the actors are great. Hell, even Dwight Fry is one of my favorites. He almost steals the show from Bela Lugosi, believe it or not. I mean, as Renfield, you know.
I agree.
And then Edward Van Sloan is Van Helsing is great too. But even though, like I said, it's almost a little bit too convenient in the movie that he already knows everything. But I think that's just the product of the time as well. I mean, they weren't making epic length movies yet. You know, it was like an hour and 15 or so minutes.
You had to have somebody to make this make sense. Like he's just the exposition dumper, you know. So make this weird situation, this weird world make sense.
But yeah, and it is kind of the birth of at least the birth of Universal in the talkie era of them becoming known for their monsters. Because before this, you had Phantom of the Opera, but that was a character that carried over into talkies, because they did make a remake of the Phantom of the Opera as a talkie a little bit later. But you don't really think of Universal monsters in the silent era per se. It's not until this 1931 that you get Dracula, and then not too quick succession after that you get Frankenstein, and then of course right into the Mummy and Wolfman and all that. So this really got the ball rolling on that iconic role, iconic actor, and the start of something huge for Universal. I'm going to go with 4 stars on it myself as well.
I think pretty much across the board we all agree. I'm just going to go slightly higher than the rest of y'all. I mean, we're splitting hairs, but I'm going to go 4.5 stars. I mean, like, to me, I think, like, just to compare, maybe I should have done this before you guys gave you ratings, but, I guess it's fair either way. The only other ones we've done from, like, say, the classic Universal monsters was the Wolfman and Frankenstein. When we did Wolfman, when was that? That was the Summer of the Wolf. That was, God, what was that? 2021, something like that. But anyways, we did that back in episode 61. Donnie, you gave that one 3 1/4. So did Will. Smoke, you gave that one 3 3/4, and I gave it 3.5. Now, fast forward to, literally earlier this year when we did Frankenstein episode 201. Donnie, you gave that one 4 1/4. Smoke, you gave it 4 stars. I gave it 4 3/4, and Tiana, you gave it 3 stars. So you were the low person on the meter there for Frankenstein. So this one, though, I'm not going to quite put it on the level of Frankenstein, but it's right below it. I just think as a movie, I think like the staginess of it is good and bad. It plays forward and against it in some ways to me, but not much. I mean, 4.5 stars. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Like I said, we're splitting hairs here between quarter stars.
And we're not going back and re-rating Frankenstein.
No, not yet. Not yet. Now we will at the, the 6th anniversary.
We have the
show.
opportunity.
We'll have the chance to.
Oh yeah, that's right. It did fall within that. Yeah.
Yep.
And that might be a hint at mine then, because really, I like Frankenstein a little bit better than I like Dracula. Even though now I didn't realize that I'd given that a 4 star. I gave this one a 4. I'm not going to rate this one less, but that might be a hint at what the future of Dracula holds for me. I might have to go up a little bit on it because I do like it slightly better.
Yeah.
But I think that this movie deserves 4. I don't think it needs to go any lower.
I agree with that.
And that's not even to get into, what we do over on YouTube, Hammer Horror and Order. You could compare this one and some of the others that we've done to one another to kind of get a gauge of where we are. But I think we all enjoy these type of flicks, right? And like this is the kind of shit we talked about. We grew up watching this stuff, so we all love it. So that brings us to a consensus as we sit, 4.1 out of 5 stars. So obviously we highly recommend it. If you haven't seen it, which I seriously doubt at this point. I mean, it's so old. And if you like horror movies and you're listening to this, you've probably seen it. But if you haven't, please go check it out. I mean, we spoiled it, but we didn't spoil it that much to where you wouldn't get a lot of enjoyment out of it. So go check it out. Before we completely hang it up and talk about what we're going to be talking about next week, Donnie?
Connections from the crypt.
There's old laughing guy.
Yeah, just let it play out now. So yeah, probably no shock here. There's only like a few. So on the cast side, we've got Bela Lugosi, who is also in The Wolfman. Remember, he was just played Bela.
Yeah, he played his name in that movie.
Yeah, played himself.
Yep.
And then Edward Van Sloan, who played Van Helsing in Dracula, and Dwight Frye, who played Renfield in Dracula, were also in Frankenstein. All right, and on the crew side, we've got makeup effects artist Jack P. Pierce, also did both The Wolfman and Frankenstein.
Yeah, and those were years apart too, right? Because Wolfman came out
41.
Yeah, this is 10 years after Dracula.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess they kept a lot of the same people around, from I guess a lot like Hammer, right? Probably.
Yeah, and honestly, not that much different from today. I mean, you get the Conjuring universe, pretty much like a lot of the makeup effects, artists. Look at I'm gonna butcher her name, Eleanor Sibadoquia. Whatever the fuck her name is.
I remember that the butchering of that name before. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there you go. Tiana, we're going to toss to you now. Count. Now, I would imagine this should be one of the easier ones, right? Because there's not that many. I mean, if you didn't come up with a proper count, we could probably just count off right now. Like what we got, Lucy, and you've got Dracula, you've got Renfield. That's 3. Who else have we got? I mean, and not even counting the ones. I mean, there are certain ones that you see on screen. I don't even know how many people were on that boat. So
yeah, the boat. The boat was being off screen.
Yeah, so I don't even know what the final number would be for something like this. But look, I'd say it's probably less than 10. And most of those almost every one of them you don't see on screen. So yeah, without having like a definitive number. We'll go with like around less than 10, then maybe we can dig around and find like a definitive number from some source somewhere. But that leads us to... Let's talk about the kill reel.
Highlight kill.
Once again, not a good one to try to pull one from. Man, because most of them you don't see on screen, like even Dracula, like you don't see it. I'm going to go with Renfield. Because he falls down about 85 flights of stairs while screaming, like, I think he gets choked out or some shit and tossed down the stairs. So I guess I'm going to go with Renfield. So that one sticks out in my head. So we'll go with that. So, Smoke, good luck.
Gore score.
Well, this is very easy. Right? Yeah. I mean, we're talking 1931. And, Hollywood film from 1931. So, hell, I bet 0, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you don't.
I mean, there isn't any. No, I mean, there's no gore. Is there even any on-screen blood?
I don't
Did you see dripping down anywhere?
There's like blood on his finger.
Oh yeah. When Renfield cuts his finger.
Yeah, and that I don't even think you can give a 1 for that.
Yeah, and that jives because, like, once again, the other Universal Monsters picks we did, the Wolfman, you gave 0, and Frankenstein, let me see, you gave that one 1, and that was and that was probably for the little girl getting tossed into the lake or whatever the hell. Like,
just some of the experimentation stuff, maybe, but as they were, building them,
yeah.
Or I mean, they didn't show that. I mean, they aren't showing them stitching arms and legs on or nothing.
Yeah. More ghoulish. But 0. Yeah, I'm not going to argue it. Other than Renfield pricking his finger on a fucking staple or something. That's pretty much it. I think it's literally what happened, right? Like, this paper clip or this staple cut his finger, and then like Dracula goes in for the blood, and then the cross lands on his on his hand. Like, hey, I think they said too that was one of the few scenes that they lifted straight up from Nosferatu. Like that scene happened in Nosferatu, and then they lifted it, but. As far as like something that happened there that did not happen in the book, apparently. So there was that. But yeah, I guess that's where we'll leave it. Next week, our fill in the blank EULA tour of the islands continues, because last week we did Rockula, cannon fodder, Rockula. This week, Donnie's pick, Dracula. So naturally, we had to go with the Cult Corner next week. We're going to be watching Blackula. So, Racula? Oh, Racula. That's a different movie. That's a porn.
That's a whole different thing.
That's a porn. Yeah, I think so. Rockula and Dracula, and now Blackula. So, the EULA portion of the summer continues here in the Sucky Summer. But believe it or not, we're coming down the home stretch here. Like, we've only got Blackula next week, and then we've got one other movie, and then we're going to have the Sucky ending. So, unfortunately, our Sucky Summer, or Fortunately, however you want to look at it. I guess it depends on how you feel about vampire movies, right? It's coming to an end very soon, so be on the lookout for that next week. So for Will, could be with us, Donnie, Tiana, Professor Smoke, I'm Josh. We are the All-American Spook Show, and we'll talk at you next week for Cult Corner Dracula.
See y'all.
As you leave the theater, folks, please be careful. Don't let this happen to your car. Be sure to remove the speaker before you leave. If you should accidentally pull a speaker loose, please turn it in at our snack bar or box office. Thank you.